I don't know who will read this. Maybe no one. Maybe this gets tossed in a bin like the rest of my things. But if it reaches someone, and you think you recognize any part of it, the place, the name, me, then please listen to what I'm saying. Because whatever you believe, I am Ethan Elwood, not Thomas, not whoever they say I am now. It all started as a college credit opportunity. I was in my junior year at Fairmont State, a double major in history and anthropology. One of my professors had this partnership with Weston State Hospital, the massive asylum-turned-museum out in Weston. Officially, it was called a preservation initiative, but what it really meant was, we scan boxes of rotting files for barely any money, and in return, we get research hours and a line on our CV. It sounded easy, creepy, maybe, but harmless. There were 6 of us. They put us in the old West Wing, a part of the hospital that isn't on the public tours. No mannequins, no ghost hunter nonsense. Just long hallways, flickering lights, and the smell of paper breaking down after 70 years of damp silence. We wore gloves and masks, dug through rusted cabinets and warped drawers, cataloging patient records that hadn't been touched in decades. Some of it was hard to read. Old notes from doctors in the 1920s and 30s. Electroshock therapy schedules, lobotomy requests, chemical sedation plans. Patients committed for things like nervous womanhood or melancholy with religious fixation. People who were probably just anxious or grieving, locked up and left behind. But on the 3rd day, I pulled out a beige folder that stopped me cold. Across the top, handwritten in fading black ink, Elwood, Thomas. My last name. I figured maybe it was a distant relative. The Elwood side of my family isn't huge, but I'd heard stories of a great uncle or something who disappeared during the war. Still, it made my stomach twist a little as I opened the file and flipped to the intake photograph. That's when I saw it. The patient in the photo was me. Not just a resemblance. Not, wow, he kind of looks like me. I mean, it was me. Same cheekbones. Same uneven left eyebrow. Same tiny scar on the chin from falling off my bike when I was 11. The kid in the photo looked maybe 17, just like I had in my old student ID photo. Underneath the picture, in typed font, date of admission, April 12, 1931. Age, 17. Diagnosis, identity displacement, delusional projection. The notes were disturbing. The patient reportedly insisted he wasn't from that time. Described cities with glowing signs, phones without cords, machines in people's pockets. Said his real name was different, that he'd been switched. He grew increasingly agitated when staff tried to correct him. There were notes from a Dr. H. Grayson about early-stage schizophrenia with obsessive displacement of self. I didn't show anyone. Not yet. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the file and the photo evidence. Then I sat there in the dust and silence of that forgotten room, staring at the image like it was a mirror from another life. That night, I had the first dream. I was inside Weston, not the decaying shell I knew, but restored. White walls, metal bed frames, brighter than it should have been. I was in a hospital gown, strapped at the wrists, and I couldn't move. A nurse leaned over and whispered, "Don't fight it, Thomas." When I screamed, the sound didn't come from me, it came from a speaker overhead. I woke up gasping for air, sweat-soaked and shaking. But the dreams kept coming. And everyone, I was back in that same room. The lighting changed. The voices changed. But always the same restraints. The same name, Thomas. Over the next few days, things got weirder. More specific. I was in class when my professor paused mid-sentence and said, "Tom, could you read that paragraph aloud?" I froze. "Ethan," I corrected. He apologized. A slip of the tongue. Then the girl at the campus cafe handed me my drink and said, "Here you go, Tom." I never told her my name. A week later, I looked in the mirror and didn't see myself at all. It was the same face from the file. The same parted hair. The same pale, haunted eyes. And this time, there was no delay. No glitchy reflection. Just Thomas Elwood looking calmly back at me. I still felt like me. I still was me. But everything outside my own head said otherwise. I told my roommates. My advisor. The archive supervisor. I showed them the picture I took on my phone. It was gone. Just a black square now. Corrupted, apparently. I told them about the file. The dreams. The changes. They smiled carefully and asked if I'd been under any stress lately. When I insisted I wasn't Thomas, when I said I was becoming someone from a file nearly a century old, the smiles disappeared. A week later, the campus referred me to a psychiatrist. I sat in his office under buzzing lights and told him the truth. that I was Ethan Elwood, that I found a file, that I recognized my face in it, and now the world was trying to turn me into him, that people were calling me a name I never gave them. He didn't interrupt. He just nodded and took notes. I saw the form he handed over afterward. Recommended, involuntary psychiatric evaluation. Symptoms, identity confusion, delusional beliefs, potential risk. Facility, Weston State Hospital. They came to my dorm the next day. 2 men in coats. Calm voices. Paperwork. I didn't fight it. What was the point? I kept saying the same thing as they walked me down the steps. My name is Ethan Elwood. My name is Ethan Elwood. My name is... But the tag on the clipboard read, Thomas Elwood, age 21. Identity displacement, delusional projection. Now I'm here, back in Weston, in a room that feels too familiar. I recognize the cracks in the walls. I hear the same humming in the ceiling at night. My window faces nothing, just concrete and steel grating. No one answers when I knock on the door. Sometimes the nurses call me Thomas. Sometimes they don't call me anything. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear someone whisper from the mirror on the far wall. He says, "You're home now." I don't know what's real anymore. Maybe this is what happened to him, the original Thomas. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe he was me. Maybe I'm him. Maybe Weston doesn't care who you were before. Maybe it just decides. But if you're reading this, if you ever find yourself digging through old files at Weston and you see a photo that looks like you, walk away. Leave it buried. Because I've seen someone new here. A young guy. Hoodie. Nervous posture. Looks like a student. I caught his reflection in the glass of the hallway door. He was staring at one of the locked file drawers. And for a second, just a second, he looked exactly like I did. Right before everything changed. He doesn't know it yet, but he's next. I was 6 years old the last time I visited Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. It was 1985, and the place was already halfway to being a ruin. Most people don't remember that it reopened for a while in the early 80s before shutting down again for good. My parents were busy that weekend, so my Uncle Rich offered to take me. He wasn't really the babysitting type, but he liked weird stuff. Old roadside attractions, abandoned buildings, stories about hauntings. He called it Spooky Americana, like it was his own private hobby. To me, it was just a day out. I don't remember everything, but I remember the feeling. The whole park felt strange even back then, like it was stuck in time. Rusty rides that creaked when the wind blew, faded paint peeling off booths that hadn't seen a fresh coat in years. A couple of the attractions still worked, but it was mostly empty. Just a few scattered families wandering around. I remember my uncle saying, "Looks like we got the whole place to ourselves," and then nudging me like it was a good thing. But even at 6, I felt like it wasn't. The ride I wanted to go on more than anything was the Ferris wheel. It was the biggest thing in the park, towering over the sagging swings and busted bumper cars. It looked ancient, and the cars were painted a flaking red and white that reminded me of peppermint candy. A bored teenager stood next to the control box, smoking and reading a comic book. He didn't even ask if I was old enough to ride alone. My uncle handed him a couple of tickets, then patted me on the back and said, "Go on, champ. I'll take a picture from down here." So I climbed in by myself. The seat was cold and dusty. The bar clicked into place, and the wheel groaned to life, lifting me slowly into the air. That's the clearest part of my memory, riding up. I remember looking down at my uncle, who had pulled out one of those chunky old Polaroid cameras. I remember how small everything looked from the top, how quiet it was, like the wind had swallowed up all the sounds from below. I could see the trees swaying beyond the edge of the park, and for a moment, it felt like I was completely alone in the world. That's where the memory cuts out. I don't remember coming down. I don't remember what we did after. In fact, the next thing I do remember is being back at home, sitting in front of the TV with a bowl of cereal. It never struck me as odd until years later. I probably wouldn't have even thought about it again, if not for what I found after Uncle Rich died. He passed away last summer. Heart attack. Sudden. He never married or had kids, so I helped clean out his house. Most of it was the usual old man stuff, stacks of newspapers, dusty books on ghost towns and war history, random antiques he probably picked up at flea markets. But in his basement, I found a shoebox full of photographs shoved into the back of a cabinet. Inside were dozens of old Polaroids, some of them faded almost to nothing. Most were from places we'd been together, diners on the side of the highway, crumbling barns, roadside oddities. I smiled at a few of them. It was weird seeing myself as a little kid again. And then I found that photo. It was me on the Ferris wheel at Lake Shawnee. I recognized the ride immediately, that same chipped red paint, the iron frame behind me. I was gripping the edge of the seat, wearing a blue t-shirt with a dinosaur on it. But what made my stomach flip was that I wasn't alone in the car. There was a little girl sitting next to me. She looked to be about my age. Pale skin, straight black hair just past her shoulders, and a white dress that looked wrong somehow. Too old-fashioned. Like something out of the 1950s. She wasn't smiling, just staring straight ahead, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I didn't remember her at all. In fact, I was sure I had ridden alone. I flipped the photo over. In faded pencil, someone had written, "Ferris wheel, Lake Shawnee, me and Lillian, 85. The handwriting was unmistakably Uncle Rich's, but that made no sense. He wasn't in the picture, I was. Had he mislabeled it? Did he think the photo was of himself as a kid? But we looked nothing alike. And who the hell was Lillian? The name bothered me more than anything. It felt familiar. That night, I barely slept. I couldn't stop thinking about that girl, how still she was, how strange her dress looked. Something about her posture didn't sit right. I told myself it was probably another kid who got paired with me. Maybe I just forgot. But deep down, I didn't believe that. A few days later, I started digging. I looked up everything I could about Lake Shawnee, and the more I read, the worse it got. That park had a dark history stretching back generations. Built on land where violent conflicts had happened, later turned into a carnival-style amusement park in the 1920s. Over the decades, several children died there, and the deaths were gruesome. A boy drowned in the pond. A ride collapsed during a storm. And in 1954, a little girl was killed when a delivery truck backed into the swing ride. Her name was Lillian Carter. She was 6 years old. I found a blurry yearbook photo from a memorial site. Grainy black and white, but the face was close enough to make my skin crawl. It was her, the girl in the Ferris wheel car with me. Except she'd been dead for over 30 years. After that, things started happening. It started with dreams. Always the same. I was back in the Ferris wheel seat, going higher and higher, but the park below was overgrown and empty. Trees poking through the rides, vines choking the booths. I was alone, until I wasn't. In the dreams, I could feel her before I saw her. The weight of someone beside me. Cold, like the air changed around her. Sometimes she'd speak in a soft, sing-song voice. "Do you remember me? Why did you leave me there? We were supposed to go together." I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. Last week, it escalated. It was around 2 a.m. I was sitting up in bed, unable to sleep, when I heard something, a slow, rhythmic creaking. Faint, but unmistakable, like metal swaying on rusted hinges. I live on the 3rd floor of an apartment complex. There's nothing outside my window but air. Still, I got up, walked over, and pulled the curtain aside. Nothing there. Just the dark alley and the glow of a street lamp below. But something was stuck to the outside of the window screen. I opened the latch and pulled it off. My hands went cold. It was the same photo, the one from my uncle's box. The exact same one. Only this time, there was no writing on the back, no label, no date. Just a single, smudged fingerprint across the girl's face. A child-sized fingerprint, pressed in dirt. I haven't slept since. And now, every night, at exactly 2 a.m., I hear it again, that creaking sound, closer than it should be. It doesn't stop until sunrise. I moved the photo to my desk drawer and taped it shut. But this morning, it was on my pillow. I think she's waiting for me to remember something. Something I blocked out. Maybe I wasn't alone on that ride after all. Maybe something happened, and I walked away when someone else didn't. Or maybe I was supposed to stay on that wheel forever. And now, she wants me to come back. I taught 2nd grade in Logan County, West Virginia, for a little over 8 years. Small school, small district. Most of the kids came from families that had lived in the area for generations, coal country folks, working class, tough. I got to know the parents as well as the students. And over time, I got pretty good at spotting the signs of when a kid was going through something off. That's why I noticed Ellie Foster right away. She was quiet, not shy. There's a difference. Ellie never seemed nervous, never stumbled over her words. She just didn't talk unless she had to. She'd sit at the back of the room, hands folded, always watching. Her grades were fine. She wasn't disruptive, she didn't act out. But she gave off this stillness, like she wasn't fully in the room with the rest of us. It started with her drawings. Every Friday, we did a little free draw period before lunch. Most of the kids scribbled cartoon characters or stick figures with pets, normal stuff. But Ellie always drew the same thing. A black shape with wings, long arms, no face, just red dots for eyes. At first, I assumed it was a bat or maybe something from a superhero movie. But it kept showing up week after week, always hovering over a road or standing next to a bridge or looming behind people drawn with their mouths open in little circles like they were screaming. I made a mental note to ask her about it during our next parent-teacher conference. But before that ever happened, one of her drawings matched something real. It was the Monday after the Route 10 overpass collapse. If you live anywhere near Logan County, you remember it. A chunk of concrete gave out around 3 a.m. No one was on it, thank God. But a semi fell through part of the shoulder, and it took 2 days to fish it out. The news said it was a structural failure due to erosion, but it shook the town up bad. That bridge had been there forever. That Friday, Ellie turned in a drawing with a long gray line stretched over 2 hills, a stick figure truck on top of it, and the black winged shape hovering above, with red dots staring forward. I recognized it immediately. It was the Route 10 overpass. Even had the rusted guardrail on one side, the same bend in the hill. I asked her where she'd seen it, and she just said, "I dreamed it." That was the first time I felt something close to fear. Not because of the drawing, but because of how casually she said it. Like it didn't mean anything. I brought it to the principal, Mr. Delaney. He laughed it off, said she was probably copying it from TV coverage or something. I tried to explain the drawing had been handed in before the collapse, but he just gave me that look. The one you get when you're being a little too intense around kids. So I dropped it, at least out loud. But I started keeping her drawings, quietly, scanning them after school, filing them on a flash drive. I even started looking into her background, which felt wrong, I'll admit, but I couldn't shake the feeling something was seriously wrong. Her family had moved back to Logan County the year before, originally from Point Pleasant. That rang a bell immediately. The town was infamous for what happened back in the 60s, the bridge collapse, the sightings, the red-eyed thing people started calling the Mothman. I grew up hearing those stories. Most of us in West Virginia did. So when I found out Ellie's grandmother was on the Silver Bridge the night it went down and survived, my blood went cold. From what I could piece together, she was rescued from a partially submerged car and spent the rest of her life swearing a winged figure had been sitting on one of the beams in the fog. Everyone thought she was in shock. She died in a psychiatric facility in 1989. I never mentioned any of this to Ellie, but her drawings kept getting worse. They were messier, angrier. She used red crayon more and more, not just for the eyes. Sometimes she drew buildings on fire, people in pieces. In one, the winged figure stood over a school with a bell tower. That one made my hands go numb. Our school had a small clock tower added in the 90s. The shape was identical. I took that drawing straight to the principal. I told him I didn't think it was just fantasy, that something was going on with this kid, and we needed to look into it. He asked if I was feeling okay, told me I should consider using some of my accrued sick time. That's when I realized no one was going to take this seriously until it was too late. So I made a decision. I pulled Ellie aside during indoor recess the following Monday and asked her, as gently as I could, where the pictures came from. She looked up at me, totally calm, and said, "He shows me. He comes to my window." I stared at her. "Who does, Ellie?" "The winged man," she said. "He tells me what's gonna break. I have to draw it or he gets mad." I tried to keep my face still. "Has he ever hurt you?" She shook her head. "No, not me." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept looking at the most recent drawing, the one with the school tower, and replaying what she'd said. "He gets mad." I was going to call CPS. I swear I was. I just wanted to give it one more day, to talk to her again. But that day never came. That night, the power went out. Windstorm. Heavy rain. The whole town went dark. And sometime between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m., the transformer next to our school exploded. No one was in the building again, thank God. But the sidewall near the old tower caught fire and part of the structure collapsed. The school was closed for 2 weeks. When I finally returned, Ellie was gone. Her parents had pulled her out and moved back upstate. No forwarding address. No records requested. The only thing left behind was one last drawing, taped to the underside of my desk. It showed a classroom on fire, kids with red mouths, and the winged man in the window, with words scrawled above in blocky crayon letters. I tried to tell you. I haven't taught since. I still live in Logan County, but I keep the blinds closed at night because sometimes, just before the wind picks up, I hear something tapping at the glass, and I think I know what it wants me to see next. I was 17 the night my best friend Jake disappeared. It's hard to even write that sentence because part of me still doesn't believe it, like he's going to text me out of nowhere one night and say it was all some elaborate joke, and we'll laugh about it like idiots. But it's been 4 years. No texts, no calls, no trace. And I haven't been back to Mountwood Castle since the second time, but I still think about that wall almost every day. Back then, we were just bored kids in Wheeling with nothing better to do. It was early November, one of those cold, brittle nights where the wind cuts sideways through your hoodie and you can see your breath even if you're standing still. There were 4 of us that night, me, Jake, Liv, and Connor. We were tight, especially me and Jake. He was the bold one, always pushing things just a little further than the rest of us. If there was a dumb idea to be had, Jake would be the one to make it sound brilliant. Connor had been reading local legends online, creepy places, supposed hauntings, that kind of thing. He mentioned the Mountwood Castle ruins and said he'd read about a group of kids that supposedly went missing there back in the 90s. We all rolled our eyes at first. Everyone in West Virginia's heard some version of that story. But Jake's eyes lit up. "Let's go," he said. "Right now." So we piled into Liv's old Civic and drove through the twisting back roads until we hit the top of Mountwood. You could see the lights of the city from up there, stretched out like distant fireflies through the trees. We parked near the cemetery and hopped the fence, flashlights in hand, breath steaming in the dark. The castle isn't really a castle. It's a crumbling stone structure, part of a failed monument from the 1800s, I think. Just jagged walls and the skeleton of what was supposed to be something grand. Overgrown, graffitied, and falling apart. But at night, it feels like something more. Like something ancient. We stepped through what used to be the entrance, our lights cutting long shadows across the cold stone. Everything was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like the air itself was holding its breath. We poked around for a bit, daring each other to go deeper into the ruins. There were old staircases that led to nowhere, hollowed-out corners that smelled like mildew and earth. Liv stuck close to me, already spooked. Connor wandered off to take pictures. Jake, as usual, went straight to the darkest corner. It was a freestanding section of wall near the back of the structure, about 10 feet high, 8 feet wide. No graffiti on it, no markings. Just flat, weathered stone with a thin line of moss running along the base. It looked totally ordinary, but Jake stopped and stared at it for a few seconds, like he'd just noticed something the rest of us hadn't. "I think there's a gap behind this," he said. "There's no door," I told him. He didn't answer, just walked right up to it and rapped his knuckles against the stone. The sound was off. Not hollow exactly, but different, like something was absorbing the sound behind it. Connor came over and tried to shine his light along the top. Liv was already telling Jake to quit messing around, that it was cold and creepy and she wanted to go home. But Jake just smiled, that smug, sideways grin he always had, and said, "Hang on. I think I see something." Then he stepped around the corner of the wall and disappeared. At first, we thought he was hiding. Classic Jake move. He'd pulled crap like that 100 times before. So we laughed, called his name, waited for him to jump out and scare the hell out of us. But he didn't. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. We split up, circled the wall, searched behind it, beside it, even climbed halfway up to look down from above. Nothing. No Jake. No footsteps in the dirt. Just cold stone on all sides. That's when Liv started crying. We called out over and over, louder each time. Connor tried his phone, but we were up too high. No signal. I climbed the wall myself, heart hammering. Shined my light across the backside, and all I saw was more rock, ivy, and dirt. No opening. No ledge. No place for him to be. We finally ran back down the hill to the car and drove to the nearest gas station to call the police. They launched a full search the next morning. Brought in dogs, drones, ground crews. They combed the entire ridge, the castle, the cemetery, everything. They found nothing. No sign of Jake. Not so much as a footprint beyond the edge of that wall. 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy found Jake's flashlight. It was wedged into a narrow split about 5 feet up the wall, a split we know wasn't there before. It wasn't big enough to fit a hand into, maybe 4 inches deep at most. But the flashlight was in there, tucked in like someone had placed it with care. It was still warm. They took it in as evidence, but there was nothing else to go on. The official report listed him as missing, presumed lost in wooded terrain. His parents put up flyers. We all did. Nothing came back. I stopped sleeping for a while. Started having dreams about that wall. In them, I'd walk around it over and over, but it kept growing taller, wider, until it was like a maze of stone, and no matter how far I went, I couldn't find my way back. Sometimes in the dreams, I'd hear Jake calling from the other side. Faint, distant, like he was underwater. 2 months after he vanished, I went back up there alone. It was a stupid idea, I know, but I had to see it again. I brought Jake's flashlight with me, the same one the cops gave back after the case went cold. I stood in front of the wall, the same spot where he vanished, and just stared at it. Nothing happened. No sound. No shift in the stone. Just silence. But when I turned to leave, I heard it, the softest, almost imperceptible scraping sound, like something moving against the inside of the wall. Slow, rhythmic, almost like nails. I ran. I didn't look back. I've never gone back since. Sometimes I think about breaking that wall down, getting a sledgehammer, tearing it open stone by stone. But I'm afraid of what I might find. Or worse, that I won't find anything at all. That he's still there, somehow. Just on the other side. Waiting. And no one else will ever believe he was even real. I used to do solo hikes as a kind of escape. I'd pack light, pick an unfamiliar trail, and just disappear for a few days. No signal, no distractions, no one texting me about deadlines. Just trees, silence, and the steady rhythm of my boots on dirt. That's how I ended up near Brandy Gap Tunnel 2, tucked deep in the West Virginia hills. I wasn't looking for it. I'd started my hike from a trailhead near Metz, aiming to cut across some forgotten rail beds and rejoin the main route on the east side. I'd heard about the old railway tunnels up there, how they were abandoned after the floods in the 50s and left to rot. I figured maybe I'd poke my head into one, take a few pictures, and move on. But what I found, I wasn't ready for that. It was the second day of my hike. I'd made camp near a creek the night before and broke camp early, planning to push through the ridge before sundown. The trail had mostly dissolved into overgrowth, but I followed the old rail ties and found the tunnel just after noon. It was exactly what you'd expect from something built a century ago and left to die. Massive stone archway, crumbling at the edges, covered in moss and graffiti. Rusted rails led into it, half swallowed by mud and weeds. The air around the entrance was cold, not just cool, but actually cold, like opening a freezer door in the middle of summer. I figured I'd walk in maybe 50 feet, just enough to get out of the sun and grab a quick lunch. I had a flashlight, but it barely cut through the black. The tunnel seemed longer than I expected. The sound of my footsteps echoed back at me too fast, like the space was pressing in closer than it looked. I kept walking. About 100 yards in, the ground leveled out and widened. That's when I saw the makeshift camp. It wasn't trashy or random like some squatter camps I've come across. It was lived in, organized. There was a foam pad neatly rolled up against the wall, a plastic tarp strung like a lean-to above a crate filled with canned goods and bottled water. A rusted lantern sat next to a stack of old newspapers. Nearby, there was a cracked mirror leaning against the stone, and in front of it, a comb and a shaving razor. Someone had been grooming themselves. Recently. Then I saw the man. He was standing about 15 feet from me, completely still, partially hidden in the shadows. I hadn't heard him approach. His clothes were layered in threadbare, old canvas coat, pants that looked like they were once military issue, boots that had long since cracked apart. His face was lean, hollow, framed by a tangled gray beard. But what I remember most were his eyes. Wide, red-rimmed, alert in a way that didn't feel quite right. Neither of us moved for a few seconds. Just silence between us. Finally, I raised a hand and said, "Hey, sorry, I didn't know anyone was here." He stared at me like I'd just spoken in another language. Then he said, "You need to leave before sunset." I blinked. "I'm just passing through. Didn't mean to bother you." He shook his head slowly. "Doesn't matter. No one stays after dark. Not here." His voice was raw, like he hadn't used it in a while. I looked around, trying not to seem threatening. "You live here?" His answer took a while. Then, 41 years. That stopped me. I thought I misheard. "You've been here 41 years? In this tunnel?" He didn't answer. Just looked at me like he was sizing up whether I believed him. I asked, "Why? Why here?" He looked down at the ground, then at the walls around us. It doesn't see me when I'm quiet, and I know how not to move. My mouth went dry. What doesn't see you? His head turned slightly. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "The one that walks the middle." I didn't know what that meant, not really, but my stomach dropped. Something in the way he said it, like it wasn't just a phrase, like it was a rule. He took a step closer and pointed at me. "You still have time. If you leave now, don't walk the middle. Don't stop if you hear it. Don't look if it speaks." I slowly backed away. "Okay, I will." He nodded once and turned away. Just like that. Walked back into the darkness beyond the lantern's glow, vanishing into the black like he'd never been there. I didn't wait. I turned and walked straight back toward the entrance, not running, but fast. Every few steps, I looked back, half expecting to see him again. I didn't. What I did see, just before I reached the mouth of the tunnel, was a deep gouge in the stone along the center of the path. A smooth, perfectly straight line worn into the floor. Like something heavy had been dragged along the middle again and again and again. That night, I made camp miles away, uphill, where I could see the valley. And around 1 a.m., I heard a sound echoing faintly from that direction. A long, low metallic scrape, followed by something like breathing. Deep, slow, wet. I didn't sleep. I've looked online since. Tried to find records of anyone living in that tunnel or of people going missing nearby. Nothing recent. But there was a story in a local archive about a man named Ronald Bishop who went missing in 1982 after walking away from a psychiatric facility near Fairmont. He was never found. He would have been about the right age. And if he really had been hiding there for 40 years, maybe he wasn't crazy. Maybe he was the only one who wasn't. I haven't hiked alone since. And I've never stepped inside a tunnel again, not even halfway. Because now I know what walks the middle.